The scorpions appeared in an instant. Thousands of them, their amber bodies suddenly visible in the fading light, covering every inch of the canyon floor in a writhing, clicking carpet of venom and claws. "Don't move," whispered Jack Morrison, his weathered eyes scanning the horrifying scene unfolding before the hiking group. What had been a beautiful trek through Arizona's remote Phantom Canyon had transformed into a nightmare as the setting sun revealed the true nature of the ground they stood upon. 12 hikers, including 3 children, found themselves stranded on a small rocky outcrop, surrounded by what appeared to be tens of thousands of bark scorpions in an unprecedented mass breeding event. 3 hikers had already been stung, with 9-year-old Emma showing signs of severe allergic reaction. The narrow canyon walls made helicopter rescue impossible, and the rough terrain prevented vehicle access. The only path forward or backward meant crossing directly through the scorpion-infested terrain. Jack Morrison wasn't supposed to be there. At 63, the retired Air Force Pararescue Specialist had been enjoying a solitary hike when he heard the desperate screams echoing through the canyon. 26 years in the Air Force's elite search and rescue units had trained him for exactly this type of scenario. Civilians in danger, limited resources, and a rapidly deteriorating situation. "I'm Jack," he said, his voice carrying the calm authority that came from decades of military service. "I was Air Force Pararescue. I've dealt with situations like this in Afghanistan and Iraq." He didn't mention the hundreds of rescue operations he'd led or the Medal of Valor hanging in his home office. "We can get through this, but you'll need to follow my instructions exactly. People's lives depend on it." Jack crouched at the edge of the rock outcrop, studying the scorpions with the practiced eye of someone who had survived desert deployments. "Bark scorpions," he muttered, noting their distinctive thin pincers and raised tails. "Most venomous in North America." He turned to the group's leader, a pale-faced park guide named Thomas. "How long since the first sting?" "About 30 minutes, Thomas replied, gesturing to where 2 adults sat nursing swollen hands. Near them, little Emma's breathing was becoming labored, her face flushed as her mother held her close. Jack's assessment was grim. The scorpion density was unlike anything he'd seen, clearly an abnormal breeding event triggered by specific weather conditions. The creatures were highly aggressive, likely defending their breeding ground. And worst of all, the sun was setting. "They'll become more active after dark," he explained to the group. "We have maybe 1 hour to get moving." Initial attempts to contact emergency services failed. The canyon walls blocked cell signals, except for one weak spot where Thomas had managed to send a partial SOS before losing connection. Jack examined the canyon walls for an alternate route, but discovered even more concerning news. The crevices in the rock face were filled with clustered scorpion nests, making climbing an equally dangerous option. As Emma's condition worsened, Jack felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. It was the same feeling he'd experienced during a mountain rescue in Hindu Kush. Lives depending on his decisions, limited options, and time running out. "In the Air Force," he explained quietly to Thomas, "we train for survival in hostile environments. This is just another hostile environment." Jack mentally cataloged their resources. 1 partial first aid kit with antihistamines, but no epinephrine. Hiking poles and backpacks, a limited water supply, natural materials like sand, rocks, and the sparse vegetation. He recalled his wilderness survival training at Fairchild Air Force Base, specifically the techniques for navigating through dangerous wildlife territories. "We're going to create a path," he announced to the group, "and we're going to move through it together using military formation and communication." Some of the hikers looked skeptical. A tall man with an expensive camera snorted, "No offense, but you're a bit old to be playing soldier, aren't you?" Jack didn't take the bait. He'd faced worse skepticism during civilian rescues before. Instead, he knelt beside Emma, checking her pulse and breathing. "Your daughter's having an anaphylactic reaction," he told her worried mother. "The antihistamines will help temporarily, but we need to get her to medical attention within the next 2 hours. He stood, surveying the group with a calm assessment of a veteran who had seen far worse situations resolved through proper training and leadership. "I understand your doubts," he said to the group, "but right now, military experience is exactly what you need to survive this." Jack's mind flashed back to his training at the Air Force Survival School, specifically the desert module where they'd learned to handle venomous creatures. First, we need protective gear, he announced, emptying his backpack on the rock. Everyone, pull out your rain gear, jackets, pants, anything waterproof, he instructed. As the hikers complied, Jack explained his plan. We're going to create improvised gaiters and gloves. In pararescue, we learned to use available materials to protect against environmental threats. Under Jack's guidance, the hikers used duct tape from a first aid kit to seal rainwear around their boots and wrists, creating barriers that scorpions couldn't easily penetrate. For those without rain pants, Jack demonstrated how to wrap spare clothing around legs and secure it with tape, a technique he'd used in desert operations. Now for repellent, he continued, gathering small rocks. In survival training, we learned certain minerals can deter arthropods. He crushed the stones into powder, mixed it with small amount water, and demonstrated how to apply the paste around boots and ankles. Not perfect, but it disrupts their sensing abilities. Next, Jack applied his military pathfinding skills to identify the safest route. He took a hiking pole and carefully prodded different areas, studying the scorpion's response patterns. We're looking for the path of least resistance, he explained. In Air Force search and rescue, we call this threat density mapping, finding where the threat is minimized. After 15 minutes of methodical testing, Jack had identified a navigable route where scorpion density was lower, a slight natural depression, where water occasionally flowed, making it less appealing for the arachnids. We'll move in a specific formation, Jack instructed, arranging the hikers. Military column formation, single file, 3 feet between each person. He placed the strongest adults at front and rear positions, keeping the children and injured in the protected middle. I'll lead. Thomas will be our rear security. If I raise my fist, everyone stops immediately. If I point, everyone moves in that direction. The skeptical man, who introduced himself as Richard, a geology professor, questioned the military precision. Is all this really necessary? They're just scorpions. In pararescue, Jack replied calmly. We had a saying, precision prevents casualties. One person moving unpredictably could endanger everyone. Jack demonstrated how to use hiking poles to sweep the ground before stepping, a technique adapted from military mine-clearing procedures. He taught them the scorpion shuffle, a way of moving that minimized ground contact and create vibrations that warn scorpions away. Communication is critical, Jack emphasized, establishing clear hand signals and voice commands. In combat rescue operations, we couldn't always talk. These signals work in any environment. As the group prepared to move, Jack called upon his compartmentalization training, the military skill of focusing completely on the immediate task while setting aside fear or distraction. He knelt beside Emma, who was now breathing better thanks to the antihistamines, and spoke gently. When I was in the Air Force, we rescued a little girl about your age from a mountain in Afghanistan. He told her. She was scared too, but she was brave, just like you're going to be. We're going to get you home, but I need you to be my special assistant. Can you do that? Emma nodded, her eyes wide but determined. Perfect, Jack smiled. Military missions need brave people, and that's exactly what you are. As the sun dipped lower, Jack took his position at the front of the formation. Move out, he commanded, using the same tone that had guided countless military rescue operations before. As the group inched forward through the scorpion-infested terrain, Jack maintained a steady pace, using his hiking pole to clear a path. For the first 100 yards, his strategy worked. The improvised protective gear kept the scorpions at bay, and the formation maintained discipline despite the horrifying sight of the writhing ground. Then they reached the narrowest part of the canyon, a bottleneck where the path contracted to barely 6 feet wide. Here, the scorpion density was highest, the ground completely obscured by their undulating bodies. Beyond this section lay their exit route, but crossing seemed impossible. We need a diversion, Jack announced, kneeling to examine the terrain. He recalled a technique used during a rescue operation in Iraq, where his team had needed to cross territory infested with aggressive hornets. Hand me your water bottles and any alcohol-based hand sanitizer, he instructed. Working quickly, Jack created a mixture of water, sanitizer, and crushed vegetation. This creates a smell that will temporarily confuse their sensing organs, he explained, drawing from his SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. I'll test it first, he said firmly when Richard volunteered. That's how we do it in rescue operations. Team leader assumes the highest risk. Before anyone could object, Jack applied the mixture to his boots and moved into the densest section of scorpions. The creatures scattered initially, but several still climbed onto his improvised gaiters. 2 found gaps in protection, one stinging his calf, another his wrist. Jack grimaced but continued forward, establishing that the path was viable. It works, but not perfectly, he reported, returning to the group. The pain from the stings was intense, but Jack compartmentalized it. Another military skill that served him now. Emma's condition was deteriorating again, the antihistamines wearing off. Only 1 dose remained. Give it to Emma, Jack said when Thomas suggested he take it for his stings. In pararescue, we live by a creed. These things we do that others may live. The mission comes first. For the final crossing, Jack employed a technique from his swift water rescue training, creating a human chain where each person provided stability for the next. Link arms. Step exactly where I step, he instructed. This is how we moved injured personnel through dangerous terrain. As they began crossing, a sudden shift in the scorpion swarm cut off their path. Without hesitation, Jack positioned himself as a human bridge over the densest section, allowing others to step on his back rather than the scorpion-covered ground. In combat rescue, he grunted as the hikers carefully crossed over him, sometimes you become the path. Richard, the last to cross, finally understood. You're really doing this, he said with newfound respect. Just like you were trained. Just like I was trained, Jack affirmed, rising despite several new stings and the venom now causing his vision to blur slightly. Emma reached for his hand as they continued the final stretch, her small fingers gripping his with complete trust. The same trust he'd seen in the eyes of those he'd rescued in war zones across the world. 90 minutes after beginning their perilous journey, Jack led the group out of the canyon's mouth to where park rangers and paramedics had gathered, alerted by Thomas's partial distress call. Emma was immediately rushed to waiting ambulances, her condition serious, but stabilized thanks to Jack's care during the trek. The paramedics also treated Jack for multiple scorpion stings, though he insisted others be attended to first. A local news crew arrived, eager to interview the retired airman who had safely guided 12 people through what rangers were calling the worst scorpion breeding event in Arizona history. Jack politely declined the spotlight. I just applied my training, he told the persistent reporter. Any of my pararescue brothers would have done the same. It's what we were trained for. Thomas, now recovered from the ordeal, shook Jack's hand with emotion. You saved us all, he said. Especially Emma. The doctor said, without your quick action and getting her out when you did. Jack nodded, understanding the unspoken gratitude. In the military, we have a saying, leave no one behind. That doesn't end when the uniform comes off. In the following weeks, as Jack recovered from the effects of multiple scorpion stings, he reflected on how his military experience had prepared him for this unexpected civilian rescue. The rigid training, the muscle memory, the crisis decision-making, all had remained sharp despite the years since his retirement. Perhaps, he thought, this was a true legacy of military service. Skills and values that continue to serve long after the uniform is put away. The local park service invited Jack to help develop new emergency protocols for wildlife hazards, incorporating his military expertise into civilian wilderness safety programs. What had been a near tragedy became a model for how military training could translate to civilian crisis response. 6 months later, at a small ceremony where the Park Service honored his actions, Jack finally spoke publicly about the experience. Military training doesn't end at discharge, he told the audience. Veterans carry skills that serve our communities in countless ways, often invisibly, often without recognition. The same precision, teamwork, and courage that protects our nation overseas continues protected here at home every day through the actions of veterans in every community. Emma, fully recovered, presented Jack with a hand-drawn picture of their rescue, complete with stick figures moving in perfect formation through a sea of scorpions. Have you ever encountered someone whose military training helped in an unexpected situation? Jack asked the gathered crowd. Our communities are filled with veterans whose experience and training make us all safer every day. Share your stories of veteran heroes you've met, or if you're a veteran yourself, how your training has helped others in civilian life. These stories deserve to be heard and remembered. As the applause faded, Jack hoped that somewhere, another veteran might be inspired to step forward when needed, continuing the unbroken line of service that defines the military spirit long after uniform is set aside.